Hi. In this unit, we're going to look at how organizations assign authority, how things are organized such that people can make decisions and have the power to see those decisions enforced. All organizations have both formal and informal patterns of authority, and we're going to look at both of them because they're both very, very important if you want to understand how an organization works and if you want that organization to work as effectively as possible. Now, in a previous module, we talked about span of control, how many people an employee can supervise or manager can supervise. We said that they can supervise more if they can monitor those employees easily, if the employees have similar jobs. But we also said that when employees are well trained and are formally organized into teams, then span of control can be increased. They need less supervision. And that really happens because when teams are formed and employees are given these organizational models, they're also given some authority over how they do their own job. And by giving employees authority on how to do their own job, you are decentralizing the decision-making systems in that organization, and you're putting the employees in a position where they need less supervision because they're able to supervise themselves. This is one of the most advantageous aspects of using formally organized teams. If you don't put your employees into formal teams, they will quite often organize themselves into informal teams. They will begin to recognize the employees with whom they need to work and who has the right expertise. And they will then gradually, informally, assume certain authority that management may not even be aware of. So when we talk about authority, we usually talk about something called the line of authority. In this case, it's the line shown here in red that runs from the chief executive officer down through the vice presidents to the lowest levels in the organization. And this line of authority sends orders downward, directives downward, but it also acts as a line of communication. Questions and reports and information flow upward. So any manager who is on this line is called a line manager. The military calls this the chain of command. They mean exactly the same thing. That there is a line, a chain that runs from the top of the organization to the bottom of the organization. And that is how authority is exercised. The CEO gives orders to the vice presidents, who then interpret those orders and give corresponding orders to their lower level managers, who then give the orders down to their employees. Things flow up and down along the line of authority. Now, there's a concept called unity of command. And interestingly enough, in one of the first units in the first module in this course, we met Henri Fayol, who was a very early manager, 1888. He published 14 points that were tips for managers on how to run an organization. And one of his 14 points was called unity of command. And what he really said was each person in the organization should have one clear boss to whom they report. If you're not sure who you report to, who is your boss, then you can't be sure what that boss needs you to do. You can't be sure that you are correctly executing the plans of the organization. So unity of command simply says each employee should know who their boss is, and they should have a single boss from whom they receive their orders. It also means then that CEO should avoid giving orders to those lower level managers or direct employees because it cuts out of the loop those intermediate managers who are in the line. And it makes it very difficult for those managers to know what they're doing and to make proper decisions. So typically in an organization, the best results happen when everybody along the line of authority respects that line of authority and uses it. And that's how communications flow up and down in an organization. Now, this is a picture of something called a matrix organization. And this is an organization that's a combination of the functional organization and the product organization that we saw in an earlier unit. It has the same product managers with the same responsibilities. And these are vice presidents of products. But it also has the same vice presidents in charge of production, marketing, and accounting that we saw in the previous functional organization. The idea behind this is to gain the efficiency of a functional organization and the flexibility and effectiveness of a product organization. Unfortunately, the relationship between these two sets of vice presidents can be very difficult to understand. And imagine you're this marketing manager inside the cleaning compounds division. You report to the cleaning compounds vice president, but you also report to the marketing vice president. In fact, on some days you're probably confused about who is your real boss, and you spend a lot of time trying to get answers to your questions. These two groups of managers spend a long time debating with each other and arguing with each other, etc. Matrix organizations are promising in theory, but they are marked by a very poor unity of command. And that often means the organization is far less effective than you might think if you only understood the basic theory of organization. So my advice to you, if you find yourself in a matrix organization, or if you are considering establishing a maintenance organization, remember unity of command and spend a long time deciding which one of these managers is really responsible for what and who works for whom. So, authority, we're used to thinking about authority from a formal sense. It's based on the organization, its structure, and its policy. So the vice president in charge of production has the authority to make decisions about producing the product and can use the line of authority to push those decisions downward and to direct employees in that part of the organization to make product as they're instructed. That's formal authority. You can look at the organization chart and you can tell who has authority over whom. Informal authority is a lot more interesting and sometimes a bit of a slippery beast. In most organizations, there's always people who have unusually strong technical ability, or sometimes they're very senior, very highly respected people who may have been in the organization for many, many years. This gives them a great deal of personal influence. These are often the people that informally we go to when we have a question. So if you're confused, you're writing software, you're confused about how to solve a certain software problem, you might go to the wise Yoda of software, this person who has been with the company many years and knows its software products brilliantly, and informally ask him or her for some advice. That person is exercising informal authority at that point. They are giving directions on how the product, the software in this case, should be produced for the company. But if you looked at the organization chart, you would have no idea that they had that authority. So informal authority is in the background. It describes, interestingly enough, who can sometimes make decisions, who has the opportunity to influence decisions. You usually have to work in an organization for a while before you get some idea of what its informal authority structure really looks like. And all organizations have an informal authority structure. So there's always that person to whom everyone turns. And when we study leadership, we'll look again at how these people exercise their power. But for now, just be aware there's always an informal structure, and managers should quickly become aware of it when they join a new organization. Communications between different functions, that up and down communication, can also be informal. And we typically call this the grapevine. So when someone says, I heard something on the grapevine, I heard that we're being promoted, I heard that we're being sold, etc., what they are doing is repeating information that they have heard informally. It's not something that management has shared with employees. It's something that perhaps employees are sharing with each other. There can be some serious problems with this. and they can lead to a lot of confusion and a lot of people who are not certain what's going on, a lot of fear and drama. Generally, however, informal authority and informal communications are considered very important in an organization. Good managers make use of them, and good managers try and understand them. Each organization has its own informal structure, so as you change organizations or move around within a large organization, recognize that you'll have to keep learning about the informal structures every time you go someplace new. You yourself may become part of the informal structure as you build your own technical skill and your personal influence. I encourage you to read the chapter associated with this unit and to review the questions associated with this unit and try and answer them on your own. If you're at all confused about authority and unity of control, then I suggest that you review this video as often as you need.